Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to show you 3 wealth engines. I call this the wealth operating system. So just like my phone, it has an operating system that's built in here, and it runs all the different apps together. We have 3 wealth engines, and we build these together. There's more than 3, but I'm going to give you 3 main ones. And we build all these engines together, and they create a wealth operating system. We're going to go through 3 of these wealth engines, how to build them, how they work together. And at the end, then I might invite some of you, if you want, to book a personal treasury audit with my team. And on that call, we'll help you build out a balance sheet x-ray, your collateral map, your liquidity stack. We'll design your entire system with you, but we'll get back to that later. But for now, let's build the engines. And I want to show you the 3 engine upgrades. Okay. So engine number 1 is our base engine. We need to build the engine. You can't just go buy like a cheap car engine and then throw like a bunch of like high performance supercharger stuff on there. Like you'll blow the motor. You got to build the right motor first. We want to build the base engine. We want to put all the good parts in it. And this is our treasury operating system. It's the base foundation, the engine. Call it 300 horsepower. Some of you guys are car guys. There I see Aaron says, as a car guy, I approve of these graphics. All right, so you guys understand it. As a car guy, I need to make sure that my engine is powerful enough to handle the additional upgrades I want to put on it. And this is what we call the Treasury OS, the Treasury Operating System. OS stands for Operating System. All right. Now, this is where our assets will fund our life, not our income. The goal is once we have this base engine going, instead of working for money, using the money to pay for our life, and if we have a little bit saved at the end, we can invest. Instead of that, we work to make money to buy assets, and then the assets pay for our life. That's it. That's engine number 1. Now, then, once we have the base motor built up and it's strong enough to handle the upgrades, engine number 2 is the supercharger. This is going to be income and tax optimization. And this is where we can reclaim, we can redirect, I don't know, 100,000, 200,000 or more per year in taxes. And that's money that would have gone to the government, any government, doesn't matter what country you're in. And then you can, instead of sending it off to the government, you can invest it instead. Okay, now that's going to take our base motor from say 300 horsepower to 650 horsepower. We're pushing serious power. We're going really fast. But then engine number 3, this is the nitrous oxide. This is the velocity engine. And this is where you're going to discover how to activate what I call lazy capital, lazy dormant capital. I'm going to explain what that means as we get deeper into that. But it's how we can get $1 single dollar. Instead of doing $1 doing 1 job, we can get $1 doing 5 jobs. And this will take our engine from 650 horsepower to 1,000 horsepower engine. We'll be building wealth at an extremely rapid rate. Now, remember when I said that Sailor uses 3 moves? I said that the third one that he uses that we can copy does about 80% of the work. Okay, this is it. This is engine number 3, the velocity engine. That's the nitrous, because that's where the magic happens. Okay, that's where the magic happens. But the problem is, if you try to inject nitrous oxide on a 4-cylinder engine, you're going to blow the whole engine apart. This is how people blow themselves up. They try to use advanced strategies, but the motor isn't capable of it. Okay, so we don't want to skip ahead. We have to do this in sequence. We build the base engine first. You put the supercharger on second, then you can handle the nitrous oxide. Okay, so stick with me, and we're going to build it right. We're going to build it right. We're going to start with the foundation, engine number 1. Okay, so engine number 1 is our base layer. And let me show you why the income game is rigged. So let's say that you're making $500,000 a year. Now, depending on what state you live in or what country you live in, probably at least of that 500, probably at least 200,000 goes to taxes. So you live off the 300 that's left, and you're super disciplined, and you manage to save, let's call it 50,000, right? That's 10% of the 500. And you invest it into index funds, like I already said, at like 8%, that outperforms the market. 20 years later, you have about $2.5 million. But here's what they don't tell you. Inflation, the real inflation, it's not CPI. It's not that. CPI. It's not that. But the real inflation, which is the rate of the monetary expansion, cuts the amount of money that you saved in half. So now you don't have 2.5 million. Now you've got 1.25 million in buying power and purchasing power. Then you retire. And then what do? When you retire, you start selling your assets, right? You start selling your assets. And then what? You have to pay tax on that. So now you're paying at least 20% on taxes on that. So now you're at like $1 million. So you earned 10 million over 20 years and you kept one. It's terrible. Hopefully that makes you mad. But here's why it fails. Failure number one is your income maxes out. Again, right? Like we can only make so much money. Like Michael Saylor tried for 2 decades. He could not grow the business. Eventually, we all hit a ceiling. As I said, right, the cost of living is going up about 10% a year. The cost of your homes, your gas, your insurance, your steak, all those things. But your income most likely is going up about 3 or 4%. So you can never get the income to go up as fast or faster than the rate of your cost of living going up. But meanwhile, we can get assets going up at 20 or 30%. So wouldn't it make sense that we would want to get our assets to outrun our life increase? So failure number one, your income maxes out, right? At some point, doesn't matter if you're a business owner, doesn't matter if you're a W-2 employee, this doesn't matter. But at some point, you can't just 10x your income. Failure number two, inflation destroys you, right? The real inflation. Like I said, 10% per year. So if you're earning 8% on your investments, which is beating the market, right? It's probably about 7.5%, 6.5%. You're losing 3-4% a year. Failure number three, retirement then forces you to sell. So I'm going to quit one day and I'm going to start selling my assets to live. But the problem is the compounding stops. You start dying financially. Your money is dying. Now here's the proof. This system never worked. 50% of baby boomers today, the largest segment of the population, 50% of them have zero money saved for retirement. That's how well that's worked. The other 50% that do have some money, it averages about $240,000. So that's good for a couple $1,000 a year. That's the income game. Okay, here's the switch though. You see, the old engine is I earn money, I pay tax. If you're a W-2, the government takes their money off the top. At least if I'm a business owner, I get to keep it a little bit longer. But I earn money, I pay tax. Whatever I have left after that, I can use to fund my lifestyle. And then whatever I have after that, if I scrimp and save, then maybe I have a little bit to invest at the end. And then I hope that it grows. And I hope that it doesn't run out before I die. So I'm trading time for money. I'm maxed out. And then I have to sell all my assets in retirement. I die with zero. The new engine, the engine that we can build as a treasury first, the treasury operating system, is I earn money and I take the earned money and I put it into assets or collateral, tax optimized, tax deferred. We're going to get into that. Then I use that collateral, I use those assets as liquidity. That liquidity funds my lifestyle and builds my wealth. So I'm now building assets that work 24/7, 365, the assets to fund my life. We never have to sell our winners. This is how the wealthy operate. Michael Saylor is not selling his Bitcoin to live. He used the assets to pay for his life. That's why I said earlier that revenue is vanity, balance sheet is destiny. All right. And here's why we want to run this. Well, I've already given you several reasons, but let's look at another one. There's 3 costs to selling. So the traditional plan, again, make some money, pay some taxes, live on what's left. If I have a couple bucks extra, I'll save it. And then when I want to retire, I start selling my portfolio down. But here's what happens. There's 3 costs. Number 1, compounding. Compounding stops. Now, what does compounding mean? It means it grows on top of the growth, on top of the growth, on top of the growth. That's not linear growth. That's exponential. That means that 1 million turns to 2, 2 turns to 4, 4 turns to 8, 8 turns to 16. It gets crazy. But if I sell, I interrupt the compounding every single year. On top of that, when I sell, I have to pay taxes. So now not only do I lose the compounding, I also lose the taxes that I have to pay up front. So I have a smaller base as well. Then that's the tax drag. And then third, I lose the opportunity cost of being able to have the money. All right, so what we want to build out in our base engine, there's 4 components. Hopefully you're keeping notes. And each of these 4 components in the base engine solves different problems for us. Assets are like tools. You know, one of the most common questions I've got is, Mark, what assets should I buy? Should I buy Bitcoin right now? Should I buy a rental property right now? Do you like gold? Should I buy gold? How about treasuries? Are stocks a good time to buy stocks? Like, what about these meme tokens? Like, assets are like tools in a toolbox, right? If I had this like master set of tools, like a professional auto mechanic, for example, and you're like, hey, Mark, throw me a tool. I'm like, okay, do you want a screwdriver, or do you want a wrench, or do you want a hammer? Like, what do you want? Well, it depends, right? Assets like tools, they all serve a very specific use case. And most of you don't know the difference. So the solution is what we call the balance sheet X-ray. All right, so we're going to classify every asset that you own. Is it collateral? Is it a productive asset? Is it a deadweight asset? Problem number two is that we think that liquidity is cash. So in order to not get liquidated like I did in 2008, in order to build wealth like Michael Saylor, we have to learn how to do it safely. Otherwise, we blow ourselves up. That's why Dave Ramsey tells people don't do anything that can blow you up. But that's like saying never go into the ocean and go swimming because you don't know how to swim. We could learn how to swim. We could learn how to swim and we could put a life jacket on. And so we have to understand that liquidity is how we don't blow ourselves up. But liquidity is not cash. So a lot of you think you have to hold a lot of cash for safety. But cash is liquidity, but liquidity is not cash. Okay, then so that's the collateral map. We want to build that out. That's how we can find out how much liquidity we can access, when we can access it, how we can access it. Problem number three again, is that most of us are one emergency away from being forced to liquidate assets. Remember, never be a forced seller. I got some calls from people today that are facing some serious liquidation costs. They're asking me for if I can give them some solutions. There's massive liquidations that they're facing. One emergency away. So the solution is to build out a 4-layer liquidity stack. Layers 1 through 4 all serve different purposes to grow our wealth fast. Layers 1 through 3 really protect the growth of layer 4. And then problem 4 that most of us deal with is that we view credit, we view leverage, we view buying assets in this multiple layered strategy as risky. We misunderstand it. So what we want to do is we want to build out a risk and leverage policy. This would have like loan to value caps. We'd stress test our portfolios. We build liquidity buffers. All right. This is what I didn't do. This is what I didn't have in 2008. If I did, it would have saved me a lot of money. Now we put those 4 together. You've got your 300 horsepower engine. You've got your assets to fund your life that you never have to sell. And that's before we add the supercharger and the nitrous on. Now, I'm not going to teach you how to build all 4 steps of these right now. That's what we do at our personal treasury audit. But let me show you what happens when you do build them out the right way. Okay, so like Michael Saylor in 2020, right? We talked about this. He had $500 million in cash sitting in the bank. It was kind of dead weight, right? He's like, look, I was sitting on a melting ice cube. The money was losing so fast because in 2020, right, the government was printing money so fast. He's like, it's literally melting. Right now, it's losing about 10% a year. In 2020, it was a lot faster than that. And so he made the switch. He swapped the cash for Bitcoin and put Bitcoin in for whatever asset you want. But he swapped the cash for assets that became collateral. Then what he did is he used 2 different tools that we have available to us, one being credit or debt, and the other being equity. And he used the credit and the equity to start to build up his asset base. He used the credit and debt and equity to buy more collateral, more capital. And then he used the capital and collateral to get more credit and equity, and he used the credit and equity to buy more capital. He never sold it. He just kept stacking collateral, renting liquidity against the capital, buying more capital, renting liquidity against it. 5 years later, he went from 3 billion to 50 billion. All right. Now, this is not a Bitcoin story. It's a treasury story. And I know, like you and I, we're not starting with 500 million. Maybe you have, 100,000 or 500,000 or a million. Doesn't matter. The move is the same. The move is the same. We have the same tools at our disposal. Let me show you someone maybe that's more like you who did the same move. Now, Sarah is a real estate investor in California. She came to us thinking that she had maybe like a couple 100,000, maybe 500,000 in spare capital. But we ran an audit. We found out she had 2 million in sitting dormant capital. Now, what does that mean? And how much do you have? Well, I'm going to walk you through that in just a minute. So we're going to figure that out for yourself. But she had about 2 million sitting dormant that she didn't know about. Home equity, 401k, Bitcoin, cash and savings, all of it doing one job. So we built her a collateral map, activated 50% of it, about 1 million of that. We deployed it into cash flowing, tax advantaged assets, built her 4-layer liquidity stack so she's never at risk of getting liquidated. And here's what her life should look like in about 20 years on a conservative basis. If she does nothing, if she doesn't do any of this, she'd end up with about $5 million. Pretty good. but then she'd be forced to sell those assets to live. She'd be paying taxes and all of that, and she'd hopefully die before she hit zero. But if she activates, let's just say even call 50% of her dormant capital and runs the system, it'd be 42 million. Never have to sell assets. Generational wealth. This is for your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids. So her cost of waiting is about $36.5 million. That's what the base engine does. Now, we had to run through that dormant capital audit. I'm going to show you that, but type Sarah in the box if you're wondering what your dormant capital number is. Yeah, I see a bunch of Sarahs. We're going to help you get there. Don't worry. I got this coming here in a little bit. But Sarah's not alone, right? Mike in Texas, he found 1.2 million in dormant capital, activated about half of that, about 600,000. And now he has cash flow of about $72,000 a year coming in tax-free. Tax-free. Doesn't have to sell anything. Lisa in Florida had about 800,000 in her 401k, unlocked it, put it into some miners, which is one of my favorite ways to get some tax depreciation. I'm going to talk about that more later. And she's on a path to $6 million in 15 years. Tom in California, real estate guy, $2 million in equity doing nothing. Pulled some of his equity out, bought 3 more properties. Now his cash flow doubled. Jessica in New York, 400,000 in Bitcoin, borrowed about 120 against it, deployed it into something called like what I call the strike convexity trade. I'm going to break it down for you a little bit. Never had to sell her Bitcoin. David in Arizona, 1.5 million in dormant capital, activated about 40% of it. Now he's generating about 90,000 a year passive. Now, we've had hundreds and hundreds of people that have gone through this system that all have similar results. What about me? Well, I told you in 2008, I lost everything because I didn't have this system set up. I didn't have a liquidity system. Then from 2009 to 2015, I earned a lot of money, but I was building little to no wealth. I was paying cash for everything. I was playing the income game. But then as soon as I switched to the treasury game, everything changed. From 2015 until today, I built 5 times more wealth than I had done the previous 15 years combined, even with building and selling 2 big exits, 2 big companies. And that's what the base engine does. Okay, so now let's jump into engine number 2. So we've got the base engine. We understand how that works. But now, how do we start to put more power in that? Right here, that's the question. Let me ask you a question. How much are you paying in taxes this year? How much do you expect to pay in taxes this year? 50,000, 100,000, 200,000? What if I told you could redirect 50, 70, 90% of that back, and you could redirect it into your own assets instead of giving it over to your government? Okay, that's engine number 2. It's called the supercharger. Now, if you were able to do that, let's say over 20 years, that's 600,000 to maybe 1.2 million that you keep instead of giving it away. How do you do that? Let me show you. So probably the number one objection I hear when it comes to building your own wealth engine and building wealth, and I've seen it a bunch in the chat already, is I wish I had that much money. I don't have that much money. I can't save that much money. I can barely afford to live. And I hear all these things, right? All these reasons why we don't have any extra money. And I understand it's tough, right? Like I said, I'm making 100 grand. 40,000 goes to taxes. How am I supposed to live on 60? I can't live on 60. So maybe I put 5 grand or 10 grand away. I understand it. So if the number one objection is I don't have enough money, how can we speed that up? Well, here's what it looks like. Again, if you make 100 grand, you're paying 40 grand in taxes. You probably don't have anything left to invest. Maybe you earn 250,000 and you pay, 75, 80 grand in taxes. Probably nothing left to invest. If you earn 500,000, you pay 175,000 in taxes. Nothing left to invest. And I know a lot, I'm not looking at the chat, but I can already hear it. Like someone is making 100,000 is like, well, if I made 500,000, then I could have extra money. No. You see, it's not the amount of money that we make, it's the way we approach the game. I talked about this quite often. There's a game called Cash Flow. Robert Kiyosaki, my mentor, created it. It's a very educational game. I would recommend you play it. But in that, you draw a career card, and you start off like as a doctor or a plumber. And it tells you how much money you make. And then you randomly draw the card. But when I play with my kids, I just automatically give them the highest paying card. And I automatically start with the lowest paying card. I'm making 20 or 30 grand a year. They're making 150, 200,000 a year. And I can beat them every time. And not just beat them by a lot. Because it's not how much income we make, it's the system that we use or the way that we approach the game. Now, again, if you're thinking I don't have enough money, No, let me reframe this for you. You do have the money. You do. The problem is you're giving it away. Let's look at the cost. So if I make $100,000 over 20 years, I'm giving away $5.1 million. If I'm a $250,000 earner over 20 years, I'm giving away 11.8, almost $12 million. If I'm a $500,000 earner, I'm giving away almost $30 million over 20 years. The money's there. You're just not reclaiming it. Saw a lot of people putting some tax amounts in there right now. All right, let me show you how we can start to reclaim that. I see some big amounts in there. Okay, so here's how we can do it. Here's how the supercharger works. What we want to do is we want to use debt to buy tax depreciation assets. So let's say that I could reclaim 50%, maybe up to 95% of my tax bill. I then deploy those reclaimed taxes that I've already made it, I would have given away. I now reclaim it and I put it into compounding assets. The best part is I do it $0 out of pocket. Now, I'm not going to teach you all the mechanics of how to do this right now. That's what we do on our personal treasury audit. But let me show you the math of how this works. Okay, so here's how it works. If we have three different income levels, if I'm a $100,000 earner, I'm going to pay $40,000 in taxes. Again, nothing left to invest. But if I use the supercharger, I would say borrow $30,000 against wherever, a credit line, a HELOC, a credit card, whatever. Borrow the $30,000 to buy $30,000 of depreciation. So it costs me nothing out of my pocket. How do I get that? We'll talk about some ways to get that in a second. But now I have, let's say, $90,000 in tax depreciation. That's a 3 times multiplier. So now I get to write off $90,000 in tax depreciation against my $100,000 of income. So my new tax bill, instead of 40, is now 4. I've just reclaimed $36,000. I didn't spend any money, 0 out of my pocket. I reclaimed $36,000, and I can deploy that into assets. And if I do that for 20 years, that's almost $10 million. I didn't make any more money. I didn't make a single penny more. I didn't work an extra hour. Well, I had to work some hours to set this up. If I'm a $250,000 earner, same playbook. I borrow $50,000 against some credit line that I have. I buy $150,000 in tax depreciation. I reclaim $52,000 per year that I already made. I'm giving away. I can now get to invest. That could be 13, 14 million in 20 years. If I'm $500,000 earner, same thing. I buy $300,000 in tax depreciation. I reclaim $100,000 per year. In 20 years of doing that, that's almost $30 million. Right? That's what you're gaining when you use debt to reclaim taxes, because it's $0 out of your pocket. I didn't spend any money. I ended up with more money at the end of the year instead of less. Now, let me show you where we get to the 3 times or 5 times tax depreciation. So a couple examples. John in Texas, he's a W-2 earner. And again, this doesn't matter if you're a W-2 earner or you're a business owner. He's making $150,000 a year, paying about $45,000 in taxes. We showed him one move. He was able to drop his tax bill to $12,000. So he's saving about 33 grand a year. 3 years later, he's reclaimed about 100 grand over those 3 years, and he's deployed it all into assets. And at the rate he's on, that should be about $2.6 million in 15 years. What was the move? I'm going to show you exactly these tax depreciation moves. But before we do, Lisa, same thing, $200,000 earner, paying about $80,000 in taxes. 2 different moves for her. Dropped her tax bill to $15,000, saving about 65 grand a year. Over 5 years, that's now about 325 grand. Compounding at a conservative rate, that's about 7.8 million in 15 years. But remember this base engine? We had to build the 4-layer liquidity stack first. That's a 300 horsepower motor. Then we added the tax supercharger on top of it. So she used a business line of credit to buy solar tax credits. One of the ways that we buy depreciation, solar tax credits. And now she has a 650 horsepower motor, the base, plus the supercharger on it. Back to John, he had borrowed about $80,000 from his home equity line of credit. So again, $0 out of pocket. He bought one of my favorite ways, Bitcoin miners. I know right now the price of Bitcoin's plummeting today. So people are like, what? Why would you ever buy that? We'll answer that at the Q&A at the end. Bought Bitcoin miners, and we were able to get about $240,000 in tax depreciation from that. It's about a 3 times multiplier. That's the supercharger. So we have to build the collateral map first, because that's the base engine. Then we add the debt and the tax depreciation on top. That's the supercharger to get to about 650,000. What do I do? Well, each year I go, what do I calculate should be my approximate taxable income for the year? Then, now that I know my target, this is what I expect to be my taxable income. How much depreciation do I need? So I'll use debt to buy tax depreciation assets to offset that taxable gain. That way I can reclaim a really large portion of the taxes each year, and I can put that right back into assets. My goal is to take 100% of my income and going into assets, and then my assets to pay for my life. Now, I built the base engine, then I stacked the supercharger on top of it using debt and depreciation. That's how I was able to build, 5 times more wealth in just the last 10 years than I could the previous decades before. Right? That's a 650 horsepower motor. We're not quite to the 1,000 horsepower motor yet, but we're getting there. But here's the final piece. We can have 2 people, same net worth. So let's say they got to the end of their life, they managed to save, $5 million. Person A lives off income, so it's all being taxed. So they're pulling $200,000 per year, paying about $60,000 in taxes, living on what's left, about $140K. 20 years later, net worth $2 million. But he has to sell his assets to live. Person B lives off debt. The reason why we live off debt is it's tax-free in any country. It doesn't matter what country you're in. You don't tax debt. I could borrow money against my assets and pay $0 in taxes. I could live on the $200,000. That means 20 years later, my net worth is not $2 million. My net worth is now $15 million because my assets kept compounding the entire time. Remember, only income is taxed in every country. Debt's never taxed. It's what Robert Kiyosaki does. It's what Donald Trump did before he became president. It's what all billionaires do. You use debt to reclaim taxes. You use reclaimed taxes to build assets. And then you use assets to fund your life tax-free. That's the supercharger. Now, on the personal treasury audit that we can help you with, we could build out your base engine, the 300 horsepower, your collateral map, your 4-layer liquidity stack. Then we add the supercharger. We map out your debt sources, your tax depreciation strategy, and then we'll add the nitrous, the 1,000 horsepower.